I didn't want to go to rehab because then my parents have to know, my wife's parents have to know, extended family, my friends, I was all worried about what that looked like.
We are back in the studio of Hope to Hustle. Brandon Wark is joining us today. I'm so excited to have you on and in studio to share a bit about your journey. I also want to share that you are a alumni of Avila Heights Recovery. Welcome.
I am, yes. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you very much for getting me on this path to recovery. I am eternally and very grateful for what, BFR and Avila did for me and legitimately changed my life. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you celebrated 1 year when? Recently?
Yeah, November 6th.
Oh, gosh. Time is flying when you're having fun. Oh.
500 days yesterday.
Yesterday. I love it. Yeah. And what is it that you did in Avila and then you did it again on your 1 year, the cold plunge?
Yes.
In the ocean?
So it just so happened, my wife and daughter picked me up from Avila, and we went to Avila Beach, like the pier, and there was a bunch of people kind of gathered, and we were like, what's going on? And so I asked somebody, and they're like, oh, it's the polar plunge. And, I was fresh out and, just wanted, I was like, oh, this is just a sign. You know? And so I was like, I'm just going to do it. Ugh. So me and a bunch of people just ran into the ocean, and it was wild. There's people dressed up in like In-N-Out uniforms.
Really?
People like in dirt bike, head to toe with like the helmets and stuff. And then so I've decided to make that an annual thing. So we did that this year too.
Very cool.
Yeah.
How was that? Was it cold?
Not as bad as expected, but it's definitely a In-N-Out situation. and also, it depends on what ocean you're jumping into and and where you're doing it. So first year was Avila, and then last year we did it in Santa Cruz. And so it hasn't been too terrible yet, but I'm trying to build myself up. We want to do it kind of somewhere different every year. So,
yeah, that's cool. I like that.
I assume if we do it in Alaska, it'll be much more terrible.
Oh yeah, maybe save that after like maybe 5 years of experience with it to brace yourself for that. Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. I know. I love it. I mean, and you came in pretty willingly too. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing a bit about your journey, and I say willingly because there's now you're an admissions counselor with our team, and now you're on the front end and you're seeing the different calls that come through of family members or loved ones, support system, sometimes the client themselves. And it ranges from people who are seeking help for their loved one, terrified, that something bad's going to happen if they don't get the help that they need, but they're unwilling. And then we get the calls of those who are looking for help for themselves. What was your journey through the process to wanting to seek help?
So my journey is quite a long one. I'll try to get through it as quick as possible. But, for me, I would say where it originally started as far as, getting into like addiction or anything like that. My first glimpse of it was, I was 12. And as a child, I've always been a very shy, individual, always kept to myself. And, somewhere along the way, somebody that I knew was prescribed Ritalin, and I took it, just because.
At 12?
At 12.
Wow.
And, for somebody like myself, it does kind of like the opposite effect of what it's supposed to do. And it made me extremely outgoing and extremely talkative. And that was my first experience of feeling different in a way that made me feel almost like comfortable. By no means did I dive headfirst into, like full blown addiction at that point or anything, but that was my first mental experience of the shift and going, oh, like I can feel better, per se. Outside of that, throughout even through high school, I was a very, quote unquote good kid. I never got in trouble outside of like truancy. I wasn't big on school, but I wasn't a big party kid or anything like that. My parents trusted me in that regard. It really wasn't until I was like 20, where things really kicked off. That was the first time I tried everything. I was, I guess, ready to kind of blow the doors open. So I kind of hit the ground running. I started drinking heavily. Then it was all college. So I was kind of exposed to everything. I was doing cocaine, I was doing LSD, I was doing ecstasy. I was always the one that said sure. There wasn't anything I wasn't open to trying. And then my life transitioned into I was a musician, and I was working in the music industry as far as, working for bands, starting at around 21. And that's kind of really what the big change was. We were gone 6-9 months out of the year, and, we're all kids. I was 21, 22, 24, and I was typically like the oldest one, so, I mean, it's kids out, just no supervision, no one telling us what's right, what's wrong, no one saying, you don't have to do this, you can take a day off,
right?
Like you don't have to party tonight. But for us, it was just, it was part of it. It was waking up. The moment we woke up, we would smoke. And then, obviously not everybody does the harder drugs and stuff, but I was mixed in with that group. So, it was daily. Where can we find it? How much can we do? And then in the background of that was always alcohol. That's just around, and that's a nightly, daily occurrence. And I did that through my 20s, moved home around 30, and it was a weird transition. I went from always being surrounded by a close-knit group of friends, daily, and same thoughts and same feelings and same actions, like that's just what we did every day. And I moved home to not that, I didn't have my circle or anything, and I was navigating, trying to fit in with that. And it took me a while to realize that that's what my life was missing, was that close-knit group. And so then I just started drinking more, that was one thing I couldn't turn off, I had gone through quitting the hard drugs, and that wasn't a normal part of my life. That was something that I was able to stay away from. But, if we were out and I had a few drinks in me, all of a sudden, it's easier for me to say yes to those things.
Right.
So, the drinking just continued to get worse. Instead of it being binge drinking on the weekends, now I'm, figuring out how to drink during the week and not let that kind of, mess up my family life or anything like that.
Were you always close with your parents, your family?
Yeah, very
Did they
close.
recognize any of this? Like, even at 12, I mean, if more talkative, did they question that at all?
No, because I was always really good at being secretive. Like when at 12,
like
when
most addicts, huh?
Yeah,
What a shocker.
I planned it out. I didn't know what it was going to do, but I still had the mentality of I have to plan this out.
Right.
So like I knew I was going to my buddy's house.
Knew it was wrong,
and
so
it was
knew
a
you needed to,
sleepover.
right.
Like my parents weren't going to be there. Which is crazy to think that like somehow I had that mentality.
Right.
Like,
At 12 years old, it's so young.
Yeah. And where I learned that, I don't know, like it was just, and even the drugs and stuff, like my parents knew I smoked a lot of weed, but they didn't know about the hard stuff, like, or at least as far as I know, they didn't, I'm sure
so
that there
when
was
you were
like
out, they didn't really question too much when you were out on tours and.
When I was in the house, or I'm sorry, at Avila, we had some family counseling and they knew that, partying was a part of the lifestyle.
Right.
But they just kind of assumed like I would
do it responsibly, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of did to a degree, I guess, if you can do like heroin and meth
recreationally.
But no, I was always like very good at hiding it. And that even kind of went in, like a lot of my friends from home didn't live that lifestyle. And I knew that it was like looked down upon. Mm-hmm. And so when I was home, like I would still get high and stuff, but I would do it alone, like I knew that I couldn't do it in front of them. So I would just do drugs in my room alone.
Right.
Like, cause I still needed to feel that, even though, it made me isolate and everything. But then, got married, had a kid and my drinking just kind of just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I kept opening a drink earlier and earlier and earlier. And then, towards the end there, it was, wake up, send my wife and daughter off. As soon as I saw my wife pull out the driveway, then I would make a mixed drink. And then I would, pass out around noon and try to wake up in time to not look like I was just sleeping for a few hours before my wife and daughter got home. And then, I would time it out where, when my wife's pulling the driveway, I would crack a beer and like, oh, this is the first drink I'm having today, those sorts of things. And so long story short, to get to the willingness of coming in, sorry that.
No, I mean, that definitely is, part of the process. It's, there is always a backstory of where it starts, whether it's, a couple of years or starting a child, being young and just the unknown of what something is, but, you're feeling different. I feel like, those are the things that are important to share with others because they're experiencing similar things. If they've either gone through the process themselves or they're curious about, finding recovery or getting sober, it's relatable. I definitely feel like that is a huge component of to where you get to. Now with your addiction, being married and being a father, do you feel that they were in tune with any of it, or do you feel you were hiding it pretty well?
I came to find out, excuse me, that I was hiding it much better than I thought I was. Like I thought it was all crumbling. My wife definitely knew things were different, but she was much more unaware than I actually thought she was. But for me, it was, I was able to like kick the hard stuff without having to go into a facility. I mean, in hindsight, I definitely should have gone into a facility, but like I toughed it out, and I was able to break those habits. But alcohol was one that I could not kick, and it wasn't really until, I told myself I was going to quit and I couldn't quit, which like scared the hell out of me.
Now tell me a little bit about that, because I feel like a lot of people have it the other way and everybody's journey is different, right? Some people just go to treatment for opiates, and I was one of those, but a lot of calls we get and a lot of clients who come through and a lot of people out there who just, because it's so socially acceptable, don't ever feel they need to go to treatment for alcohol. They feel like it should be one of those things you could just kick on your own and stop whenever you want. But what is it that you experience when you when you have extensive history of drinking, especially daily and all day? What do you experience as far as withdrawal goes?
It was miserable. And I didn't know because I had gone so long without taking a break. You know, like I had no idea what it felt like to not drink for years and years and years. I drank every day for, I don't know, 15 years.
Wow.
And, you know, not saying that I drank to blackout in that time, you know, but there was not a day where I didn't have something.
Right.
You know? And at the end, so the breaking point for me was, you know, like I had told myself, one night, you know, we were going to take my daughter to her first baseball game. And the day before I told myself, okay, like I can't wake up too hungover to go. And so then I, you know, kind of planned out how many drinks I could have, you know, and I couldn't stop there. I woke up the next day, too hungover, ridden with anxiety, you know, and I couldn't go. So my wife still went, you know, with my daughter and my sister-in-law, and I just was at home kind of sitting in it, you know. And so then I made, you know, the decision like, okay, like this has gotten out of hand. I'm going to take some time off, you know, figure this out. And so I decided to quit cold turkey that day, which I had no idea what that meant. And, you know, I started getting the shakes really bad, which, you know, kind of freaked me out a little bit, put up some red flags. And then that night, couldn't sleep at all. Was shaking, was sweating. And I had a friend who works in recovery, and I texted him like passively, like, hey, is it true that it's like unsafe to, you know, quit drinking, you know, like on your own? And my hope was that he would text me back, you know, like, no, you know, it's fine. And he texted me back like, yeah, it's extremely unsafe, you know, like you can die from it. And, you know, like it's like 3 a.m. and I'm up like,
now you're panicking.
Oh,
yeah, I'm going to die tonight, you know? Yeah.
So then to calm the nerves, you know, I drank.
Right.
And then, you know, like I kind of had this like thought of like, okay, like I have to figure out how to do this without letting my wife know that I have to like taper off alcohol somehow.
Right.
You know? And there was a few days of, you know, like I was up for like, I think like 3 days. I just could not sleep. And I was trying, you know, I was kind of allotting myself, okay, you can have a shot, you know, every hour. And then I would try to do every 2 hours, you know, and it just wasn't working. And then I finally came to, you know, or I came clean with my wife and told her, hey, like I have a drinking problem. I've been trying and I can't stop. And so, you know, my first thought was, I'll go to AA. You know, I'll go to AA, I'll get sober. And magically, you know, this will all work out.
Because nobody wants to do the necessary step, which is go into a program.
Exactly. You know, like I didn't want to go to rehab because then my parents have to know, you know, my wife's parents have to know, you know, extended family, my friends, you know, I was all worried about what that looked like.
Right.
And so instead of having to do that, I'll go to AA. It's an anonymous program after all. And no one will know. I'll figure out my drinking and, you know, we'll be good. And, you know, I didn't want to quit drinking. You know, like what I wanted was
to get it under control.
And so, you know, then I started going to AA, and then it kind of escalated my drinking. You know, like I went to the first AA meeting and I broke down in tears, you know, because it was the first moment where I was like, oh, these people get it.
Right.
But that still wasn't enough.
It's almost like triggering when you go into a meeting, not for all. There's a lot of people who've gotten sober in the rooms without having to go to a program, and I commend them for that. But you know, for me, it was definitely triggering going into knowing, okay, I want to hear their stories, and I like that I can relate, but now I can't wait to go get high after this. Yeah. It was triggering in that sense because it was such a last step for me, not a first step.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I started drinking before meetings. I started drinking after meetings, you know, but, you know, my wife knew I was going to meetings, you know, but I couldn't control it. So then I would get too drunk, and then she'd be like, I thought you went to a meeting today. I was like, oh, I did. And she's like, you're acting weird, and, finally got to the point, she suspected something was up one day. I had obviously drank way too much. She came home early from work. To my surprise, I was passed out. And she woke me up. The saint she is, she put me to bed. When I kind of came to either that night or the next morning, she had done the legwork. She had found a facility. She had found a bright future, and she was like, we're going. My willingness was finally there in the sense of I knew that I couldn't do it alone. It was very apparent to me that I had completely lost control, and I'd always felt like I had control. And so that's really where the willingness came, was the understanding, the acceptance of like, I actually can't do this alone. And, I hear a lot of people in the rooms that say things that I agree with and I relate to, but I'm not there yet.
Right.
I don't have the control yet to just go to a meeting and get filled up and be able to make it through the night.
Right.
And so that's when I checked into Avila. That was the first time where I kind of went in under the mindset and the mentality of like, I'm going to listen, because the people that are here and things, like, they know what they're talking about. I've always been somebody who, I didn't like school because, the teacher would be talking and I would be 3 sentences ahead. My mind's always worked that way.
Right.
And so, I was always smarter than everybody, and this was kind of the time where I put it down. I was like, I don't know, I need help. Whatever you say, I'll do, cause you don't get into rehab by making all of the right decisions, and like, I'd finally like let my guard down, like, okay, show me the way.
Right. And that's the way to enter treatment, to gain everything you can out of it. And it's really hard. I mean, a lot of people come in and they want to still have that shield up, that they can do this on their own. They don't need to be there. And it makes the process so much harder than when you walk in with, I'm defeated. I can't do this. I don't know the answers. I tried it on my own. It didn't work. Somebody give me, because I can't keep going through this cycle. Did you have really bad withdrawals? I mean, how was your withdrawal experience? Because it was medication assisted for you as well, right?
It was medically assisted, which was definitely helpful in the sense of, I was able to sleep. My sleep wasn't great. And even, leaving the house, my sleep was messed up for like the first 8 months of my sobriety.
Yeah.
I would go through like 3 days of like amazing, like, oh, I'm falling asleep at a decent hour, I'm sleeping through the night, and then I would have a week of, I'd be up till 3 or 4 in the morning, and which I didn't really know about the long-term effects. I was like, oh, this is terrible. Now I'm in a place where I sleep good, so that's nice. But yeah, the withdrawals were, anxiety was all over the place, but luckily, there's medication to help through that period and everything as well. And then once you kind of break through of that, I learned, so much of my anxiety on a day-to-day basis was because of the hangover and because of, like the length of everything. So, I was finally able to get a hold of, like, oh, I can go to the grocery store and not run out of there. You know what I mean? Because that's where I was, like I couldn't leave the house.
Yeah.
I couldn't go to any sort of group setting.
Right.
And if I had to do that, I'd have to be loaded.
Right.
I actually had that thought last night of, I was thinking about doing this today and thinking about if I was going to do this 2 years ago,
forget about it.
Yeah. I would have to be wasted,
So it's like a big win to be able to sit here.
Oh my gosh.
Do something. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's so crazy to hear this, version of you. And it's so crazy what recovery is, because you're so personable and outgoing and easy to talk to now, now that you've found yourself in like true happiness. And I could imagine and bet that your relationship is much better, and parenting and, all the things that come along with recovery. Did it take a long time to build those trust blocks back up with your wife, especially because you were hiding it more than you thought you were? But I'm sure for her that was like, wait a minute, he was hiding it from me so good. Am I going to be able to, catch on to any red flags? Shall they arise again?
Yeah. Yeah. I would, the first 6 months, were rightfully, I was under a microscope. Because, like as us addicts are very good.
Yeah. Master manipulators.
Yeah. Very good at it. And so, I was under a watchful eye, and, I was questioned a lot. And there were times where I would be annoyed by it. And then I would have to sit back and go, she's justified in these actions. Right. I earned this.
Right.
And in the same regard, like now I have earned, the trust back,
right.
She doesn't question when I go to the grocery store. She doesn't ask, why, the charge at the gas station, why I got charged twice, because that was my go-to back then, like get gas and then run in and grab a few things, be like, oh, the pump stopped. I had to redo it, like all those little things that we do, but now she just knows, like,
It's a good feeling.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah. What do you hold on to when times do get tough? Like, do you, is it prayer? Is it a quote? What do you tell yourself when times do get difficult? Because life always throws challenges at us, and, especially in the earlier phases of recovery and always through it, there's something we got to hold on to.
Yeah. My big things are it's always been music for me. So artists or songs that are related to recovery, are big for me. I was listening to songs about that long before knowing I was listening to songs about that or relating to that, long before. And now they just hit different. And,
right.
Now I find peace and solace in them and things like that. That and meditation is huge for me too. Like I think I always meditated without knowing I was meditating. On tour and stuff, I would always drive, and that was my meditation. That was my time to be focused in on myself. Everyone else is doing what they're doing back there, but it's me in the road and it's me and my thoughts. So that's huge. A new thing for me is also prayer. Actually speaking to the God of my understanding, whatever you want to call him. That's something, I was a stout atheist, you could not convince me otherwise, before going into recovery. And that's a newfound thing for me of finding like the peace and the solace in that,
right.
Has been massive too.
Yeah. I love that. Well, Brandon, I'm very proud of you.
Thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure to work with you and become friends with you. And you are walking success that people can do it. And that's the point, is we want to share that message and be able to share stories of hope for others that are curious or struggling or going through the process at the moment. So thank you again so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.